How's it going, guys? So we're going to talk about the chance you're going to see a white Christmas this year. So the first thing we need to take a look at is a week, how the typical snowfall patterns look like during week La Nina years. I've been going over this in my previous winter season videos over the past month or two pretty much, and we clearly see that you most likely see more snowfall than usual in the northern Midwest as well as the Pacific Northwest, with the range anywhere ranging between 4 to 12 inches above normal during weak La Nina years. So I think that this gives a good indication we're gonna see more likely shot of having a white Christmas this year, more specifically right over the northern Midwest as well as the Pacific Northwest. If we were to shift our focus a little bit further eastward, though, we see that the snowfall anomalies are closer to average, more specifically right around the Northeast. We do have the higher elevations of the Northeast typically do receive more snowfall than usual, but outside of the higher elevations of the Appalachian Mountain ranges of Northeast, it's mainly around average when it comes to snowfall during weak La Nina years. And for the rest of the country, we see that the Southwest experiences less snowfall than usual during weak La Nina years, so that does reduce the possibility you're going to see a white Christmas in this area. But for other areas just to the north of it, it's going to be definitely more likely this year. However, we need to take a look at other factors as well, especially what's going on right now when it comes to the pattern we're in, because if you've been paying attention to what's been going on along the eastern half of the United States, we've been in a very big drought. So just because there could be some areas where the anomaly brings more snowfall than usual during weak La Nina years, doesn't necessarily mean that will be the case this year, because of course every weak La Nina year is different in some way, shape, or form, and this is one of the rare weak La Nina years where we're seeing a drought this severe right over the eastern US. So I will dive into that as well and take that into consideration when making the forecast when it comes to the possibility of a white Christmas this year. So as you might expect, thanks to the higher than normal snowfall you see in the northern Midwest as well as Pacific Northwest, we do see that it's typically colder than normal during weak La Nina years, where I took all the years where we experienced a weak La Nina and compared it to a long-term average, which created this temperature anomaly plot over the United States, and it clearly indicates it's colder than normal over the northern Midwest as well as Pacific Northwest. Now, to really clarify what a white Christmas is, I apologize I haven't clarified that a little bit earlier, but what I'm defining as white Christmas and what the National Weather Service defines as a white Christmas is if there's at least 1 inch or more snowfall on the surface. And as long as you have over 1 inch of snowfall on the ground on Christmas, that would be considered a white Christmas. Now, I know some of you guys might think that the definition is a little bit different. I'd imagine that many of you guys imagine a white Christmas for it to be snowing outside. However, it's very difficult to forecast where exactly it's going to snow on Christmas Day when we're talking about a forecast that's months out and a forecast that only encompasses a day rather than a long-term generalized forecast. So for now, we're just going to settle with calling White Christmas as an event where we see more than 1 inch of snowfall on the surface that day. And it's certainly going to be more likely in North Midwest this year, thanks to the cooler and normal temperatures. Not only will that increase the chances you're going to receive snowfall, but it'll also increase the chances that the snowfall will stay there without melting, which will, of course, enhance the possibility of a white Christmas this year. For the eastern United States, we see that temperatures fall a little bit closer to average. However, thanks to the drought that's going on, I'd imagine that at least the early part of the winter time frame, you will experience temperatures that are warmer than average. And I'll show you guys the drought monitor in just a second to give you guys a better idea of how severe the drought is. But I'd imagine, thanks to the pattern we've been seeing over the past few weeks, it literally hasn't rained where I'm at in Jersey for almost a little bit over a month now. So that's of course going to play a role most likely by the time we approach December, and the possibility you're going to see a white Christmas in the Northeast, because unfortunately for those guys hoping for a white Christmas this year for Northeast, it is looking a little bit less likely this year thanks to the drought. But I'll get into more in detail with that once we get into the drought monitor part of this video. Another good thing to take a look at is the North Atlantic Oscillation, and we clearly see that we're in a positive phase right now, which for the eastern half of the United States would not be good news if you want a white Christmas this season, since a positive phase simply brings much warmer and drier than normal conditions right up along the eastern half of the United States, and mostly the United States in general, but more specifically along the eastern United States. This is due to the fact that during a positive phase, the jet stream winds are very strong, so that traps the polar vortex right over the north polar regions of the northern hemisphere, rather than the jet stream winds be weaker, which would allow the colder air to move further southward, which would happen during a negative phase where the jet stream winds are a little bit weaker. Right now, the jet stream winds are very strong, hence the reason why we're seeing such a large ridge right over the eastern United States. That's just bringing much warmer and drier than normal conditions, and that's trapping the polar vortex right around the North Pole. So, and we do see that this is expected to continue, which isn't a surprise, because once we enter a drought in a lot of these areas, it's very difficult to get rid of it, because for a drought to exist in the first place, there needs to be a set pattern that's been persistent to the point where it's very difficult to get rid of. And this most likely will last up until December. And by the time we approach late December, it could get a little bit more uncertain regarding if this ridge will still be strong over the United States, or if we'll eventually see the North Atlantic Oscillation transition into a negative phase. We're going to have to wait and see. But based on the pattern we're seeing right now, it's looking like we're gonna more likely than not stay in a positive phase, at least for quite some time. It does get a little bit more uncertain by the time we approach Christmas, but I'm leaning towards the idea that it's going to be a little bit more warmer and drier to at least start the winter for the eastern United States, thanks to the drought that's going on, and thanks to the North Atlantic Oscillation forecast, where many of the computer models are also forecasting the same thing. So that does reduce the possibility of a white Christmas, most likely for the eastern United States this year. So here is that drought monitor map that I've been talking about, not just throughout this video, but in many previous videos when it comes to forecasting the winter. And pretty much nearly the entire United States is in some way, shape, or form in a drought, with the exception of Florida, portions of the south central United States right around the Memphis area, portions of the southwestern United States. But outside of that, most of the United States is currently under a drought, thanks to this persistent ridge that's just been parked, especially over the eastern United States, for quite some time now. And I think that this will contribute to the cold and the snow to come a little bit later this year for many of these areas. I think more sickly in the Northeast, where the Northeast sickly isn't very used to droughts like this, and the ridge has really been parked over the eastern United States. So I'll say anywhere that's just the east of the Mississippi River Valley, it's more likely going to be drier and warmer, at least the early part of the winter time frame, which again reduces the possibility for a white Christmas in a lot of these areas. Now, for the northern Midwest as well as the Pacific Northwest, while you guys are certainly in a drought right now, I think it more so has to do with how the seasons work right around that area, because during the summer months, it's of course relatively rare for any sort of low pressure system or some sort of storm to move through the Pacific Northwest. So it's not uncommon for you guys to enter the fall and the winter months in a drought. So, however, I do think that once the wet season comes, well, it's already here for much of the Pacific Northwest and the northern Midwest. I think that once we really get those storms associated with a flanking jet stream towards this area, I think that will eventually get rid of a drought, especially since we're in a weak La Nina, which does promote cooler than average conditions as well as more jet stream dips to this area. So I think there will be plenty of low pressure systems that will eventually get rid of this drought, despite the drought that you're currently in. But for the eastern half of the United States, I expect it to be the opposite most likely, since it's very rare for a drought this severe to happen up along the East Coast. So I think that will certainly play a role in reducing the chance of a white Christmas in the Northeast. However, there could be a silver lining for those hoping for a white Christmas in the Northeast and the eastern United States in general. And that's taking a look at an analog year, more simply an analog year's polar vortexes. And you're probably wondering why you're showing me this. So if we were to take a look at the polar vortex index for the year of 1981 and 1982, which is a red shaded line right here. This year experienced a record-breaking weak polar vortex, which means that the jet stream as well as the cold air was flaking a lot more further southward than you typically see during the month of October, and it happened this year as well. So by where we did see a record-breaking weak polar vortex during this month or last month of October. I'm recording this in November 1st. I almost forgot about that. But so what this could mean is that by taking a look at this year, where we had a very similar pattern when it comes to the polar vortex, or a very similar weak polar vortex during the same time period, it might be good to take a look at what happened a little bit after those record-breaking weak polar vortexes we saw during the month of October. And as you can see, right by the time we approach the December timeframe, we saw a record-breaking weak polar vortex. And of course, a weak polar vortex would more likely lead to cooler and snowier than normal conditions during this part of the month, which encompasses the early to mid part of December. So I think that there is maybe that possibility that if this year ends up having at least a little bit of validity to it when it comes to the type of pattern we typically see after a record-breaking weak polar vortex in October, then that could mean that the Northeast and the United States in general would more likely experience a white Christmas thanks to a record-breaking weak polar vortex, or a very weak polar vortex in general, by the time we approach December. I'm going to keep an eye on this. It is only 1 year, so the analog year isn't necessarily very... there isn't really a lot of reference to go by when it comes to a year that's very similar to this year. So take it with a big grain of salt, but it's at least something to keep in mind by the time we approach December. So here's my white Christmas forecast for this year. So in the red shaded areas, you should expect 90 to nearly 100% chance of a white Christmas, as in a lot of these areas it's almost guaranteed every single year you're going to receive a white Christmas. It's just very cold throughout the year, and most of the precipitation you receive is in the form of snowfall. However, I will point out that in the Rocky Mountain ranges, the 90 to 100% range is encompassing a larger area than what's typical during when it comes to a chance of a white Christmas, and that's because I do expect it to be colder and snowier than normal to begin this winter. So I think that the areas in the lower elevations should have a higher possibility of a white Christmas this year, which as a result does increase the range of the 90 to 100 percentile chance of a white Christmas in this area. Now, just to the south of that, we do have a 75 to 90% chance of a white Christmas. This includes portions of Minnesota, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Michigan, as well as the extreme northern portions of the Northeast. However, this chance is encompassing a little bit of a smaller area in the Northeast, mainly because I do expect it most likely to for the Northeast to experience a warmer start to the winter time, so December might reduce the chance of a white Christmas. And this goes for all the chances in the Northeast, whether it's a 60-75% chance or the 50 to 60% chance. It's encompassing a little bit less of an area in the Northeast, because I do expect that the areas receive a white Christmas for a southward are less than usual this year, thanks to what's expected to be a warmer start to the winter. And then, of course, just to the south, that expect a 50 or a 60 to 75% chance of a white Christmas. So more likely than not, these areas should expect a white Christmas. This includes cities like Minneapolis, Milwaukee as well, Grand Rapids, Michigan should get involved, and potentially as far south as Albany. As in these areas, it's relatively more likely than not to receive a white Christmas in any given year, so it is expected in those cities. and in this general area, this includes South Dakota and Des Moines, Iowa as well, which is a little bit further southward, the 60 to 75% chance this year, because I do expect it to be colder in the northern Midwest. So a place like Des Moines, Iowa, which more so has around 50% chance in any given year to receive a white Christmas, will have its chance a little bit higher this year thanks to what's expected to be a colder winter, where you should expect anywhere between a 60 to 75% chance right around Des Moines. Just south of that, expect a 40 to or a 50 to 60% chance of a white Christmas. So around a 50-50 shot in cities like Chicago. So definitely keep that in mind. 40 to 50% just south of that. This includes Detroit now, Indiana, portions of Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, and portions of Colorado. And in the higher elevations of the Pacific Northwest, this area is a little bit larger because I do expect it to be a colder and snowier winter in those areas, so keep that in mind. 25 to 40% chance just south of that. This includes Cleveland, which is less of a shot than what you typically see during Christmas, thanks to the fact that it's expected to be a warmer start to winter. And then a 10 to 25% chance just south of that. This includes cities like New York City and Boston. However, Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. will likely have less than a 10% chance of a white Christmas, which is usual in those areas, as it's fairly rare in these areas along the coastal Northeast to receive a white Christmas where there's at least over 1 inch of snowfall or more on the surface. Because it gets relatively warm, it's hard for snow to stick around very long in these areas. So this is my white Christmas forecast for this year. If you want even more in detail forecast regarding the chance you should experience a white Christmas in your specific location, the exact percent chance, just make sure to comment down below your location, and I'll do my best to try to answer what's the probability you will experience a white Christmas this year in your location. So make sure to comment down below if you're interested. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.